More still from the week-long annual meetings of the African Development Bank, which of course enters its third day today. Speaking at the opening plenary with some 6 presidents and other top government officials and the private sector in attendance, the host, President William Ruto of Kenya, called for a more accountable, inclusive, and slimmer African Union. Let's take a listen.
More financial resources need to be channeled towards climate adaptation in Africa. At my last meeting with President Adesina, we were discussing them extending our water program, which we started with the Africa Development Bank, to phase 3, where we are discussing now a $400 million facility with the African Development Bank for water harvesting, water storage, and irrigation that will support Kenya's food security, especially in the context of the effects of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I wish to underscore the critical role of the Africa Development Group's annual meetings in advancing progressive discourse, structured dialogue, and knowledge events. These engagements provide an opportunity for collective deliberation and facilitate the dissemination of relevant knowledge among high-level decision makers in Africa from different sectors, including government leaders, academics, and the private sector, among other key players. The 59th annual meeting takes place at an important juncture in our continent's developmental history. I am confident that all of us gathered here are able, willing, and ready to apply ourselves accordingly and do justice to our common agenda of taking Africa to the next phase of transformation through constructive deliberations. Let me say this finally. My colleagues, the heads of state and government in Africa, asked me to take over the baton from my senior, President Paul Kagame, on reform of institutions of the African Union. It is an assignment I intend to work on with the support of my colleagues, to align it with aspirations of today, and so that we can support more financial institutions like the Africa Development Bank and all the other continental institutions to support Africa's development and progress. As I take over the assignment from President Kagame, let me make 4 points on that reform. Number 1, we will be proposing that the Africa Union Commission, the executive, be given sufficient power to be able to prosecute Africa's economic diplomacy so that we can unlock the potential of our continent, so that we can showcase the assets that we have, our mineral assets, our agricultural development assets, our human capital assets, our natural resources assets, and use them to create investment opportunities so that we turn our potential into opportunity and opportunity into investment and create a better Africa for all of us. Number 2, to make Africa Union a fit-for-purpose organization to take charge of the consolidation of the African market through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Today, in Africa, intra-Africa trade is only 15%. Intra-Asian trade is 60%. Intra-European trade is 70%. Intra-Africa trade is 15%. We are struggling looking for markets everywhere except in our continent. We must believe in ourselves. We must first sell to the market that we have in our continent It is the silver bullet. And it is what is going to increase the contribution of trade from Africa from 2% to the next level. Number 3, we must make Africa Union fit for purpose to secure this continent. The Africa Union must take charge of our peace, security, and stability. The Africa Union must make us solve the problems of conflict and war in our continent. We cannot progress as a continent if there is war in Sudan, there is trouble in Somalia, there is problems in DRC, there is problems in the Sahel. We must take charge of our security. We must take charge of our stability, and Africa Union must step forward to be counted to provide that cover. And finally, the Africa Union must work with us to close the infrastructure gap. We will be proposing 4 assignments. The Africa Union was initially a liberation movement. We must repurpose it. We must re-engineer it so that it addresses the challenges of the moment. We will also be making a proposal to have a much more accountable Africa Union. Today, the Pan-African Parliament has no connection to the Africa Union executive.